What if the golden age wasn't as straight as Hollywood wanted you to believe? Beneath the tuxedos and perfect smiles, filmmakers were quietly slipping truth into their stories. Hidden meanings, coded glances, and forbidden emotions filled the screen long before audiences caught on. These weren't just classics, they were confessions in disguise. Here are 15 timeless films that dared to hide in plain sight. Number 15. Ben-Hur, 1959. This wasn't just a biblical epic. It was one of Hollywood's most daring hidden love stories disguised as a sword and sandal blockbuster. Screenwriter Gore Vidal quietly crafted a secret layer into Ben-Hur, a bond between Judah Ben-Hur and his childhood friend-turned-enemy, Masala. He wrote it as a story of love turned betrayal. But here's the twist. He never told star Charlton Heston. Director William Wyler played along, letting Stephen Boyd, who played Masala, act as if he were a man heartbroken by rejection. Once you know that, the film changes completely. Every intense stare between them feels different. Their reunion scene suddenly reads like two former lovers pretending to be old friends. And their final confrontation becomes more than vengeance. It's the painful end of a relationship that could never be. In 1959 America, no one could have filmed an openly affectionate bond between two men. But Vidal and Wyler found a loophole. They turned passion into rivalry and made audiences feel something they couldn't name. Ben-Hur won 11 Academy Awards, but its most daring triumph was the emotion that slipped past the censors unnoticed. Number 14. Rebel Without a Cause, 1955. This wasn't just teenage angst, it was coded heartbreak. Rebel Without a Cause gave the world James Dean, the perfect symbol of misunderstood youth. But look closer at Plato, played by Sal Mineo, the quiet, fragile boy who idolizes Dean's character. What most audiences missed is that Plato's devotion wasn't just friendship. Director Nicholas Ray and Mineo quietly shaped Plato as a young man longing for connection he couldn't name. In one scene, Plato gazes at Dean with the kind of admiration that feels deeply personal. He even shows him a photo of his absent father, a clue to his desperate search for someone to look up to or love. The film's heartbreaking ending takes on a new meaning once you realize that this wasn't just about teenage rebellion. It was about loneliness, identity, and affection that dared not speak its name. Ray never admitted the intention publicly, but crew members later confirmed that the theme was real. And Dean, who was famously fluid in his personal life, seemed to understand it instinctively. His gentle way with Mineo on screen wasn't rehearsed, it was human. Rebel Without a Cause became a cultural time capsule, capturing the ache of isolation. For queer audiences watching in silence, it said everything they couldn't. Number 13. Rope, 1948. It looked like a murder mystery, but what Hitchcock really filmed was a love story hidden in plain sight. Based on the real-life Leopold and Loeb case, Rope followed two young men who commit a crime and throw a dinner party to prove their brilliance. The twist? Alfred Hitchcock cast actors John Dowell and Farley Granger as a couple bound by intellect, arrogance, and an intimacy that was clear to anyone watching closely. The censors never mentioned it directly, but everyone behind the camera knew. The story's tension isn't just about guilt, it's about control, jealousy, and possession. Dowell's character taunts Granger's, comforts him, even touches him with a familiarity that the audience couldn't quite define. Under the strict production code, words like relationship or affection were banned, so Hitchcock used glances instead. Film historians later confirmed that the original script included clearer, romantic undertones, which were edited down. Still, Hitchcock's signature wit remained. He didn't hide the subtext, he just dressed it up in tuxedos and clever dialogue. Rope may have been filmed in a single continuous take, but its hidden story lasted far longer. For decades, it stood as proof that even the strictest rules couldn't erase human truth. Number 12. Suddenly Last Summer, 1959. Elizabeth Taylor, Montgomery Clift, Katharine Hepburn, three powerhouse names in one deeply unsettling story. But suddenly, Last Summer was more than gothic drama, it was Tennessee Williams's coded cry against silence. On the surface, the film tells of a wealthy woman desperate to protect her family's reputation after her son dies under mysterious circumstances. But beneath the lush setting and whispered secrets lies a truth about repression and identity that could never be said aloud in the 1950s. Williams, himself forced to mask his own truth in life, wrote the story as an allegory. The terrible event haunting the family wasn't really about violence. It was about the punishment society inflicts on difference. Director Joseph L. Mankiewicz walked a careful line, keeping the censors satisfied while letting the unease speak volumes. Montgomery Clift, who was himself living under public scrutiny, gave the film a haunted realism. Taylor, one of his closest friends, matched it with raw empathy. Together, they turned what could have been mere melodrama into something heartbreakingly human. When the film premiered, audiences were divided, half scandalized, half transfixed. But over time, suddenly, last summer came to represent something far deeper: the danger of pretending that truth can be buried forever. Number 11. Gilda, 1946. Rita Hayworth's hair flip became legend. But Gilda's real electricity wasn't just between her and Glenn Ford, it was between Ford and another man entirely. Film noir thrived on tension, but this one was practically humming with it. Ford plays Johnny Farrell, the trusted right-hand man of a casino owner named Balin Munson. When Balin marries the glamorous Gilda, Johnny's loyalty turns into fury. On paper, it's jealousy over a woman. But watch their scenes again, the protectiveness, the resentment, the emotional intensity. It feels like something much more complicated. Censors forced every hint to stay subtle, but the filmmakers leaned into the ambiguity. Balin and Johnny's relationship was written with a strange intimacy, like two people bound by something unspoken. When Gilda enters the picture, she becomes the spark that exposes what the two men can't admit. Hayworth herself once joked that Gilda wasn't about romance at all. It was about three people in love with the same person. The line was meant as humor, but she wasn't wrong. Over time, critics began calling Gilda one of the most coded queer films of the classic era. It used lighting, framing, and emotional reversal to say what couldn't be said. And that's what makes it timeless, not just a noir, but a mirror of the secret desires hiding under Hollywood's perfect lighting. Number 10. The Maltese Falcon, 1941. This was more than a detective story. It was the blueprint for coded identity in classic film. The Maltese Falcon looked like a straight noir about greed and betrayal, but deep beneath the cigarette smoke, it was filled with hidden clues that only sharp viewers caught. Humphrey Bogart played Sam Spade, the tough, cynical private eye, and Peter Lorre played Joel Cairo, a character who practically redefined queer-coded villains for decades. Cairo wasn't written as flamboyant in the book, but the studio's fear of censorship made his personality both mysterious and expressive. His perfume, his polite speech, his oddly personal interest in Spade, all subtle signals slipped past the production code. Even the way Lorre handled his cane or looked at Bogart spoke volumes. And Bogart, ever the professional, leaned into the tension rather than mocking it. Their scenes weren't jokes, they were a strange dance of attraction and manipulation. The studio couldn't say it, the characters couldn't name it, but audiences felt it. The unspoken connection between Spade and his rivals gave the story an extra layer of fascination. The film wasn't mocking anyone, it was showing that emotion and obsession can cross any boundary. Over 80 years later, the Maltese Falcon remains a masterclass in double meanings. What looked like hard-boiled crime became a quiet act of rebellion wrapped in fedoras and fog. Number 9. Queen Christina, 1933. Before the censors took control, Queen Christina dared to do something unheard of: let a woman live beyond labels. Greta Garbo played Sweden's 17th century monarch with a confidence that shocked audiences. She dressed in men's clothes, moved like a prince, and made no effort to hide her independence. In one early scene, she kisses one of her female courtiers, and the gesture isn't played for laughs, it's gentle, intimate, and full of warmth. For 1933, that was revolutionary. Garbo herself was rumored to be romantically linked to women off-screen, but she never confirmed or denied anything. Instead, She poured all her mystery into Christina. The film didn't frame her as confused or tragic, it showed her as a leader who refused to live by anyone's rules. When Christina eventually falls in love with a man, it feels less like surrender and more like choice and acknowledgement of her freedom to love who she wants. Critics called the film strange and unusual, but Garbo's performance turned that strangeness into power. She looked straight at the camera in the final shot, face unreadable, and the message was clear. You'll never define me. Queen Christina remains one of the earliest films to portray gender fluidity without judgment. It didn't whisper its message, it simply existed, daring anyone to question it. Number 8. Lawrence of Arabia, 1962. This wasn't just an adventure epic, it was one of cinema's most quietly intimate portraits of a man divided. David Lean's Lawrence of Arabia followed the true story of T.E. Lawrence, a British officer leading Arab forces during the First World War. But Lean and actor Peter O'Toole didn't play Lawrence as a standard hero. Instead, they built a character filled with contradictions, gentle yet fierce, self-assured yet longing for connection. Historians and film scholars have long noted the subtle emotional tension between Lawrence and the men he travels with, especially Sheriff Ali, played by Omar Sharif. Their friendship is charged with devotion, admiration, and something just beyond friendship's edge. In a time when emotional vulnerability between men was taboo, Lean used glances and silence to say everything words couldn't. The desert scenes reflect that same inner conflict, wide, lonely landscapes for a man searching for belonging. O'Toole later admitted that Lean directed him to play Lawrence as someone torn between desire and duty, a clue to the hidden complexity of the real figure. While the movie never says it outright, its undercurrent of longing and confusion turned Lawrence of Arabia into a psychological masterpiece. The film didn't just explore war, it explored the cost of denying your own truth. Number 7. The Children's Hour, 1961. What happens when a rumor destroys two lives? The Children's Hour asked that question, and Hollywood almost refused to answer. Adapted from Lillian Hellman's stage play, the film follows two women who run a private school and find themselves at the center of a false accusation. A student claims they are unnatural, and the lie spreads like wildfire. But the real story isn't about gossip, it's about fear, shame, and the invisible walls that society built around honesty. Audrey Hepburn and Shirley MacLaine delivered performances so delicate that every pause felt heavy. MacLaine's character, Martha, struggles with feelings she can't admit, even to herself. When she finally breaks down, it's not a confession, it's heartbreak. She's crushed by a world that refuses to understand her. The original play was banned in many cities for its daring subject. Even the 1936 film adaptation had to change the entire story to avoid the topic altogether. But by the early 1960s, director William Wyler decided to confront it head-on, filming the story with compassion instead of fear. The Children's Hour remains one of the bravest studio films ever made, not because it shouted its message, but because it whispered it and made you lean closer. Number 6. Tea and Sympathy, 1956. On the surface, Tea and Sympathy was a gentle drama about kindness. Beneath that, it was a quiet rebellion against narrow definitions of manhood. Tom Lee, played by John Kerr, is a sensitive student at a boarding school who doesn't fit in with the athletic crowd. His classmates mock him for being different, and his teachers scold him for not acting like a proper man. When an older woman, played by Deborah Kerr, reaches out to comfort him, the story becomes a lesson in compassion, but also a coded conversation about identity. Director Vincente Minnelli, who faced constant speculation about his own life, handled the story with empathy. Every scene feels like it's speaking in code. Tom's loneliness, his confusion, his yearning to be accepted for who he is. The title itself, Tea and Sympathy, became shorthand for quiet understanding in a harsh world. Censors forced the ending to play safe, but audiences still felt the real message. This was a story about people who didn't belong in the narrow box society built for them. And even though it used gentle words, it struck deep. Tea and Sympathy dared to suggest that kindness itself could be revolutionary. And in the coded language of the 1950s, that was a radical idea. Number 5. Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, 1958. This wasn't just family drama. It was a quiet war between truth and performance. Cat on a Hot Tin Roof gave audiences Paul Newman at his most magnetic and Elizabeth Taylor at her most dangerous. But behind all the fiery dialogue and Southern tension, the real conflict wasn't just about money or pride, it was about identity and denial. Newman's character, Brick Pollitt, drinks himself into silence after the death of his closest friend Skipper. What the film never says outright, but Tennessee Williams's original play makes clear, is that Brick's pain isn't just grief. It's a love that the world told him to bury. The censors forced the studio to strip out the direct references to that emotional truth, but the ache stayed. Newman plays Brick as a man consumed by shame and confusion, while Taylor's Maggie claws her way through his indifference with desperation. Their scenes together aren't about marriage. They're about the space between truth and what society allows. Tennessee Williams was furious with the edits, but even he admitted that Newman's eyes did what words could not. The longing, the guilt, the unspoken affection, it's all there, painted across every glance. Cat on a Hot Tin Roof became one of the most watched films of the decade because people felt something powerful, even if they couldn't name it. And that's the brilliance of it. It showed that silence can sometimes speak louder than dialogue. Number 4. Reflections in a Golden Eye, 1967. When Marlon Brando and Elizabeth Taylor share a screen, you expect fireworks. What you don't expect is one of the boldest hidden stories in Hollywood history. In Reflections in a Golden Eye, Brando plays an army officer haunted by loneliness and obsession. Living with his unfaithful wife in a southern military base, he becomes fixated on a young soldier watching him ride horses, move through the barracks, and simply exist. On the surface, it's about control and discipline. But beneath that, it's about longing, the kind that can't be spoken aloud. Director John Huston adapted Carson McCullers' novel, knowing full well that it was walking a razor's edge with censors. But instead of cutting the subtext, he leaned into it. The camera lingers on Brando's face as he struggles between desire, guilt, and self-loathing. Even the cinematography plays along. The film is washed in a strange golden hue, as if we're seeing the world through Brando's distorted emotions. Critics at the time didn't know what to make of it. Some called it baffling, others too strange. But decades later, it's hailed as one of the first mainstream films to confront forbidden emotion through metaphor. Reflections in a Golden Eye wasn't about scandal, it was about loneliness, about a man trapped in the mirror of his own fear. Number 3. Some Like It Hot, 1959. This wasn't just a comedy, it was chaos with a message. Some Like It Hot follows two musicians, played by Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon, who disguise themselves as women to escape gangsters. What begins as slapstick quickly becomes a sharp commentary on identity and freedom. While dressed as women, both men experience life from a new perspective and start to realize that attraction isn't as simple as labels. The film's genius lies in its refusal to mock difference. Lemon's character, Daphne, embraces the disguise with unexpected joy, even joking about marriage to a man who doesn't care about appearances. It was one of the first mainstream comedies to play with gender roles and acceptance without cruelty. Director Billy Wilder didn't hide behind subtlety. He made the audience laugh their way into empathy. And it worked. The chemistry between Marilyn Monroe and her co-stars felt alive because it wasn't boxed in. It was about connection, not conformity. When the American Film Institute later named Some Like It Hot the greatest comedy of all time, it wasn't just for its humor, it was for its courage. Beneath the laughter, Wilder slipped in a radical message. Everyone deserves to be seen, however they wish to be. Number 2. The Picture of Dorian Gray, 1945. Oscar Wilde's famous novel was already a coded story of forbidden pleasure. When Hollywood adapted it, they kept the mask, but the message stayed. The Picture of Dorian Gray tells of a man who trades his soul for eternal youth, while a hidden portrait bears the marks of his sins. On the surface, it's gothic fantasy. Underneath, it's about vanity, temptation, and the cost of living a double life. The way Herb Hatfield plays Dorian, calm, graceful, detached, makes him feel like a man constantly performing for a society that would punish honesty. George Sanders' witty Lord Henry becomes Dorian's tempter, whispering philosophies about beauty and pleasure that sound suspiciously personal. Their exchanges pulse with an energy that's not just moral, but emotional, a bond that feels almost intimate. The film's lush black and white visuals highlight every unspoken layer. The only moments shot in color are the close-ups of Dorian's hidden portrait, a symbolic burst of truth amid a world of denial. Critics of the time avoided discussing the deeper meaning, but audiences felt it. Wilde's ghost lingered in every frame. The picture of Dorian Gray proved that even under the strictest censorship, art could still tell the truth if you looked closely enough. Number 1. Rebecca, 1940. Few films in history hide as much in plain sight as Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca. On the surface, it's a gothic romance, but just below, it's one of cinema's most famous coded stories of obsession. Mrs. Danvers, played by Judith Anderson, is the loyal housekeeper to the late Rebecca, the unseen woman, who still dominates every corner of the mansion. From the moment Danvers appears, she radiates a cold devotion that feels far deeper than duty. The way she speaks about Rebecca, touches her belongings, and whispers about her beauty, it's love disguised as mourning. Hitchcock knew exactly what he was doing. Every close-up of Danvers' face, every flicker of candlelight in Rebecca's preserved bedroom, turns the air electric. Audiences in 1940 might not have said the word, but they felt the truth. What makes Rebecca unforgettable is how it uses repression as tension. The new Mrs. De Winter, timid and confused, becomes trapped not by her husband's past, but by the lingering intensity between Danvers and the woman she lost. It's a story about ghosts, but the real haunting is emotional. 80 years later, Rebecca still captivates because it dares to suggest that love, once felt, never really dies. It just hides in the walls, waiting to be noticed. Golden Age Hollywood built its legacy on illusion, but these films proved that truth always finds a way through. Each story carried a secret, each frame a whisper of rebellion. They weren't just movies, they were coded acts of honesty. Which one surprised you the most once you saw what was really there? Share your thoughts and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more.